say a special good evening to Oropouche West MP and UNC Shadow Minister of Finance, Dave Tancoo. Pleasant good evening, sir.
Pleasant good evening, Mikey, to you and to your listeners and viewers. Have a great one, everyone.
Thank you so much. The UNC pre-budget consultations are being held ahead of the budget 2025 presentation, and it's going to take place throughout the country, I believe, until August 20th. The consultations are being held in every constituency in Trinidad, giving stakeholders a chance to voice their concerns, experiences, and budget recommendations. What have been some of the expectations of the constituents so far?
Well, not surprisingly, we've had 3 so far. We're having one today as well in Faizabad. And so far, I think we can easily say that the concerns of the citizens expressed in these budget consultations have all been consistent. Crime is the number one issue, and it all seems to be tied into other issues. So we have poverty, we have growing poverty, we have high food prices and taxes, we have mass unemployment. So almost everything is tied into crime and how crime impacts those issues and how those issues impact crime. Yeah. We've had some recommendations coming in. We've had some very good conversations thus far, and I expect that as we continue in the pre-budget consultations, we will get even more of those concerns and recommendations. In fact, the most critical recommendation that has come so far has been that the government must do something about crime. There have been many views about that because you need to tackle crime as a multidisciplinary, from a multidisciplinary perspective. It's not just increasing police presence, although that is a major factor. But when you have a situation, as somebody raised last night in County Central, I believe it was, when you have a situation where the court system, the system that is responsible for prosecuting criminals, is short-staffed substantially. The DPP's office is short-staffed substantially. The police service, which is responsible for investigation, is short-staffed substantially. It means that our criminal service, our criminal catching, criminal prosecution, our judicial system is in crisis because of underfunding and undersupport. So a lot of people have raised the issue that we need to fix crime, but to fix crime, we must do many things, including increasing the staffing at the police and the judiciary and the investigative units, but also in terms of providing some social support, in terms of providing employment opportunities for young people in particular. It is, in fact, a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, and let me ask you, what are the UNC's budget expectations ahead of the 2025 presentation?
Well, I know what we think will happen. I know what we would love to see. But what I expect will happen is that the minister will come as usual and tell the country that he has done a wonderful job of running the country, of managing the country, that employment is still high, unemployment is low, that we have sufficient financial resources in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. So we should not worry at all because his government is doing an excellent job. That is what we think that the minister will come and say. There may be also some promises of a few little goodies because he has to mama guide the population, given that 2025 is an election year. So we expect minor things, but what we expect is a lot of flams, a lot of starbursts, a lot of promises. But we have seen already that we cannot trust the Minister of Finance to do the very same thing that he said he is doing. He will not even provide proper information to the country.
Yeah, but you think about it, Mr. Tancoo, I mean, we've had many discussions before, and you listen to people weighing in on this issue. Why is it that the government doesn't seem to understand that this is basically, I mean, it's a top priority when you look at crime. Everything is a domino effect. And the fact that, you know, when you look at investors that may want to come in, the fact that nothing is happening in the economy and people are under siege, home invasions, elderly people who are trying to make ends meet. Why is there seems to be an out of sync sort of narrative understanding how important dealing with this issue is?
Mikey, I think your listening audience will have the same sort of concerns that you have raised, and may have a clearer perspective as to why they think that the government is facilitating this increased criminal misconduct, this increased criminal activity. This has been facilitated by the government. Only the Prime Minister and his Minister of of insecurity, and his team can explain why they are openly facilitating the actions of criminals in running this country. Only they could tell you that. For me, I think that any government that goes in that is concerned about the welfare of its citizens will tackle the issues most pressing on the backs of citizens. And for today, in our budget consultations, we have found that crime and issues associated with crime is a major factor. But it's not just crime that they've abandoned. Agriculture, we need to be able to feed our population. But the government continues to do nothing about agriculture except talk. Farmers continue to be plagued by predial larceny. After 9 years of promises by the government, they again promised a couple of months ago that they will provide increased resources to the predial larceny squad to ensure that criminals who are invading the farmers' homes, etc., would be caught and dealt with. But persons who live in Castlefield, etc., can tell you that home invasion, to the point where, and they are farmers, they are the milk basket of this country is in Castlefield. The agricultural basket is in several parts of this country, including my constituency. And the government is doing nothing about protecting farmers. We have flooding in my constituency and other parts of the constituency where food is grown. We have Aranguez continues to flood. The government is not treating with priorities that we face, and as a result of that, we are finding ourselves in grave difficulty where we should not. We, as a tropical country, as an agricultural-based country, we were an agricultural-based economy for many decades. As a country that has available land and mass unemployment, we should be able to marry those two so that we don't have a food shortage situation, so that we can reduce the food import bill, which is upwards of $5 billion per year.
Yeah, but even that has been infiltrated, but due to crime. I mean, I had Ravi Ratiram, who of course is the Shadow Minister of Agriculture, and I mean he laid out to us exactly right here on the Observer, where he's asking that these farmers be given FULs because I mean it just doesn't make sense. The access roads are no good. I mean, what's the sense of you occupying land when you can't even have access to your crops? When it is that you don't even have enough to buy fuel to go out there, especially those in the fishing community, and the list goes on and on. And you're right, this is not just one dimensional aspect of it. I mean, this is a serious problem. And so where do we go?
Because it's all related, As you spoke about firearms, the government is fighting down persons who are legal firearm owners, closing their eyes to illegal firearm ownership. We have open borders in this country. When we realized it, when it was highlighted most, when it took this government more than a month to figure out how is it a vessel could have entered our waters without anybody knowing, capsized in Tobago, cost us millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in damage and environmental damage for years to come. And nobody knows. Up to today, we don't know how that vessel came in, who brought it in, who is responsible, etc. Because our borders are porous. Not only that, but even at the airport and at the ports, after 7 years, of promising, I am told that the Minister of Finance only recently agreed and said that 2 scanner units were going to be brought in the month of July. I don't know if that was done or not, but this has been promised for so long and on so many occasions that we have no confidence in it. When you have an open border, Mikey, it means guns can come in. Drugs can come in, prostitution, illnesses of all sorts.
Human trafficking.
And the fact of the matter is that all of that has been happening while the government piddles around so that vessels which are available for patrolling can't be sent to patrol because they have no money to buy fuel. Imagine that in this country in the 21st century. We have open borders, which encourages crime. And you have a Minister of National Security, again, who's responsible for those things, who's twiddling his thumbs and giving himself high ranking for performance. And you have a Prime Minister who's endorsing that.
Yeah, now, given the presentations made in the past, what shouldn't the government focus on? Because you have people, I'm sure, that's coming to the consultation, they say, listen, we really don't know what to do. It seems as though we just have to be prepared to pay property tax, deal with the TTRA, and deal with everything else that they want to implement to milk whatever is left in the pockets of the citizens. What shouldn't they not focus on?
I was looking at an interview with the government of El Salvador, where the Prime Minister, the President of El Salvador, was saying that the first thing they did is identify the key issue for them. The key issue for them was crime. We have several key issues, but the key issue for us is not building a highway from San Fernando to Mayaro. The key highway for this government is building a highway in the forest. What this government should not focus on is just high-level, expensive mega projects. What they need to do is fix the small issues first. Treat with the issue of crime, treat with the issue of unemployment. They're all related. What we need to do is encourage investment, but no investor is going to come here when the U.S. Embassy and the Canadian Embassy are both telling the world what we already know, which is crime. There's runaway crime here. Investors will not come to put their lives at risk in a country where the government doesn't seem to be inclined to protect its own citizens, much less for the investors. So what I would really like to see in this budget is the government not focus on mega projects. Put a hold on those mega projects because they help very few people, and focus on the bread and butter items. Focus on how we are going to make sure that the poor persons in this country have a meal a day, so we don't have to have high 25% poverty level where 1 in every 5 people, 1 in every 4 people is experiencing poverty and don't know where the next meal is coming from. Put money into smaller projects. When we were in government, we did that. We created thousands of small business enterprises. This government has gone the opposite way. From COVID to now, we have gone the opposite way to sabotage and undermine the viability of small and medium-sized enterprises so that only big businesses, mega businesses, could survive. They could eclipse the small ones. And whereas you had a small gentleman bringing in carrots, for example, bringing in a container or 2 of carrots, now the mega supermarkets will do that because the smaller guys cannot get foreign exchange to do it. When you have small people bringing in small amounts, small quantities of goods to sell on the side of the streets or at home, they can't afford to do that anymore now because you have to find the money first on the black market. You're paying more than one of the mega companies must pay. But more than that, if you buy it using your credit card, you have to pay an additional tax that the large corporations and the large companies bringing in the same clothing is not paying. So what I would like to see is the government focus on bread and butter issues. Primary, I want to repeat that, primary food, agriculture, education, health, employment in all of those fields. It's available. We have high numbers of highly qualified persons in this country. What is preventing this government, for example, from pursuing tourism in the sense of health tourism? We have new infrastructure built by the Kamala Prasad Bisasa administration. What is preventing that? You know what's preventing that? What is preventing the government from getting involved in sport tourism, where again we have a large number of high-quality sporting facilities? What is preventing the government from getting involved in educational tourism? We have schools incomplete. We have universities in South and Davie, a campus almost completely done, abandoned by this government because they lack the vision. They will not pursue tourism from health. It's health tourism, it is medical tourism, it is educational tourism, it is sport tourism. The only thing that is stopping all of that is a lack of will by the government, manifested in crime. Manifested in the facilities and a soft approach to crime.
Yeah, and I think the Prime Minister has made it clear when he made the statement that there's nothing wrong with the rich getting richer. If that happens, it helps those at the bottom. So he's talking about trickle-down economics, which of course we know that in itself has never really been in the benefit of those people who are most economically vulnerable at the bottom of that economic list.
Correct. It's not sustainable because what it has done in every part of the world it has been tried, it has been proven that small and medium-sized businesses, which are not the big businesses, small and medium-sized businesses are much more effective, much more efficient, and hire more people.
And
when
that's
you get investment from a small person, from a small businessman who even takes a loan to invest his money, that's a sign of confidence that translates into employment, that translates at a different level of a multiplier effect because that's community-based. When you have large businesses getting involved in business, their profits go abroad. Their profits go into a few directors' pockets. When small businesses make money, they reinvest in other small businesses and community development. That's the difference between the UNC and the PNM. We are about building people upwards. The PNM is about building only those who are already at the top. at the expense of those persons who are the middle income and the low income, which is why today we have an almost depleted middle income community.
You're right about that. I'm glad you touched on policies because I want to ask you if you could state some of the avenues that if the UNC were presenting, what would you have made a priority to gain additional revenue?
Mikey, the answer to all of those are the same answers I just gave before. Your first priority has to be to encourage investment. But to encourage investment, you cannot just give tax concessions, etc. Your first priority must be to treat with crime. Once crime is dealt with, the abundant human resource capital that we have in this country can be maximized. The use of it can be maximized. The land that we have can be maximized. But what is required is that government to provide incentives to encourage farmers. And some of those incentives are fairly straightforward. One issue I want to raise with you. There's a tax gap that Imbert keeps talking about of $10 billion, which means that there's $10 billion in taxation that has not been collected and is not collected almost every year. $10 billion. That's 1/5 of the annual budget. 1/5. $10 billion means that if we could have gotten that every year, we would not have to borrow the kind of borrowings that the government is engaged in right now. But nothing is happening. In fact, what the government has done is mash up TTR, the Trans-Tobago Board of Inland Revenue.
Yeah.
They've mashed it up. Although they have boasted whenever they did this tax waiver where they allowed people who have not paid their taxes to come in and pay their taxes, they get $4 and $5 billion. It means the same Board of Inland Revenue was working, but it was not under the control of the government, the individual political control of the government. So they rush ahead now, and in the run-up to an election here, is trying to introduce the TTRA. That will create one set of chaos that the government is now going to blame as a justification for why the country is going to go through an even further iteration of downward spiral.
And I need to ask you this, of course, in comparison to previous years' allocation. Now, what may be a relatively adequate percentage of the budget 2025 allocation needed that should be put toward the Ministry of National Security, given this upsurge in the crime rate?
Well, I don't think it should be a percentage of the budget. I think what is required is an identification of specifically what is needed. And what is needed is increased personnel. One way of dealing with that, we have promised and championed this for the longest while, is the inclusion of the army. Only recently, after mass chaos, after mass murders have taken place, the Prime Minister suddenly agreed that the army and the police must work together. You know how long we've been talking about this? And the government and the same Prime Minister has refused to do it? They wait until the very last moment. But you need additional resources assigned to specific uses. The police need additional vehicles, they need additional guns, they need walkie-talkies, they need body cameras. Those are specific things that are required, that I think that this is the way we must target it. So I wouldn't want to say they should give the Ministry of National Security $10 billion or $1 billion. It is proven already that no matter how much chance you give this government, if they don't have the will, no matter how much money they put behind A, B, C, D, or E, unless and until there's a will and a deliberate will to stop crime, then the policies to stop crime will not come. We'll just be throwing good money after bad money, as has been done before.
Yeah, and
this government had got money and bought wooden ladders and then had to adjust a truck to accommodate the wooden ladders. Can you imagine a fire truck? Can you imagine what madness that is? Because nobody is being held accountable for bad spending in this country. I remember NGC. NGC had to write off $500 million in bad decision making. $500 million. Petrotrin went bankrupt. Petrotrin went bankrupt because the PNM, in its last iteration, the PNM engaged in 3 projects. I saw a newspaper article just recently that identified them. The USD, the ultra sulfur project, right. The gas liquids plant, and another one. There were 3 projects that ran Petrotrin into the ground, decisions taken by one man, Malcolm Jones, his board of directors. And when this UNC government had come in, when the People's Partnership government came in and prosecuted him for bad decision making, this Rowley government then came in and forgave it, cancelled everything. So when we have situations where bad decisions are costing taxpayers billions of dollars and nobody is held to account, we have a situation where the taxpayer has to now pay 2 and 3 times for our government's inefficiency. I think it is time, high time, that ministers be held to account for their failures. We can't wait. 9 years have already gone. 500, more than half of $1 trillion have been spent, you know. That is 500, I think it's 530 million, you know. It is substantial amount of money. So it's not about money that needs to be thrown, you know. What is needed is a will, a desire, a sincere desire, and a proper accountability.
Yeah, and I also think on understanding your role, I mean, to protect the citizenry, that should be the primary factor here. When you have a Minister of National Security, and I want to read this, he says, "We are having a spate of crime, including murders in the country, and my business as minister is to ensure that the police get the resources, the laws, the policy directions that they need. And I am doing that. We all have a responsibility, and once we exert them to the best of our abilities, we'll be getting somewhere."
It's very unfortunate that that is true. What his responsibility is to provide the resources. He has not done so. The failure to provide the resources is one of the reasons we are in the crisis we are in. But his function as minister and the Prime Minister's function as the head of the National Security Council is to establish management guidelines. It's to establish procedures and policies for the implementation by the police service that will treat with the critical issue of crime. You know how frustrating it is when you have the persons who are responsible for solving the problem throwing their hands up in the air and saying, "It's not my fault, it is not my responsibility, I can't do anything about that. What do you want me to do?" The Prime Minister said that there's no button to switch off crime. There's no button. 1 year ago, this gentleman, the Honorable Prime Minister of this country, held a Caribbean-wide consultation on crime. You remember that?
Yes.
It cost this country substantial amount of money to host, and time, human resource time, to host this conference. The only thing that came out of that is that a few contractors, a few persons make money by supplying food, etc., etc. There was no solution. It was all flams, and that's the problem with this country. We forget the flams, the lies, the innuendos that this Prime Minister creates on a continuous basis in disguise from this failure. National security is in front of our face now as a crisis. And the Prime Minister, who is the head of the National Security Council, whom all of those security agencies report to, including the SSA, and the Minister of National Security, continues to close their eyes and recommend that we pray. And I have no problem doing that. I pray all the time. I pray for the improvement of my country. And I pray that at some point in time, these people will face the consequences of their actions. Elections have consequences, you know. You cannot be a Prime Minister and Minister of National Security turning a blind eye to the cries of mothers whose children are being murdered or kidnapped or raped or robbed on a daily basis. Those tears must fall somewhere.
Yeah, I must say, good job by the UNC with these pre-budget consultations, because you're getting an opportunity to hear from average citizens exactly weighing in on these topics, rather than hearing from the Prime Minister that there are events like parties and fetes taking place, and so the economy is in good shape and it's healthy. And that in itself, I mean, one has to ask, are you really that out of sync with reality?
I honestly don't think that they're out of sync. I think that what they have started doing is cleverly misleading, misguiding, and changing the public narrative. The media, when you open the newspapers now, every single day, you see 3 and 4 murders every time. What has happened though? Remember when we had COVID, and there was that 1 death, and then 2 deaths, and 3 deaths?
Yeah.
At first, we were petrified, we were upset that people were dying from COVID. But by the time we got to 3,000 and 4,000, we had become numb. Trinidad and Tobago has become numb. We are suffering from Stockholm Syndrome as a country now, where we are not fighting back against this government and their failure with crime. We have had a situation where the business community only recently, literally only recently, finally found its voice, and I'm glad that it did. Finally found its voice, and I'm really ecstatic that it did. I only hope now that they will stop blaming all politicians and focus on the fact that this government, this PNM administration is in charge, and it is their responsibility to spend our tax dollars. It is their responsibility to spend our hard-earned revenue streams to improve the substance and quality of life of our citizenry. And there's not one average citizen, and I don't mean the very rich, that 1% group. There's not one average citizen who could truthfully say that their lives have improved after the government has spent $550 billion.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, all of this money, and again, has that done anything to elevate the lives of the citizenry? Go ahead, closing comments, go right ahead.
It is my hope that citizens in this country attend our pre-budget consultations and speak out, because it has gotten very good traction. But I want to also hear, I want to make sure that we hear, we want to give the opportunity to the public to participate in these events. The venues are online. Tonight we are in Faizabad. Tomorrow we are in San Fernando East and West. On the 25th, Vancouver North. We are going to Tunapuna on the 26th. Every day following, we are having these pre-budget consultations. I want members, citizens of this country to realize that you have a stake in the development of this country. You have a stake in letting your voices be heard. We're not asking you to come out and protest at this point. We're asking you to come out and speak to us so that we can champion your cause in the parliament. That is our role as representatives. That is our role as a party. We want citizens to participate. So I welcome and encourage all citizens to check our Facebook page, get involved. Because unless and until we do, this government is going to continue doing exactly what it has done for the last 9 years, which is to endebt this country and make things worse for every single man, woman, and child in this country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tancoo. Always a pleasure. Of course, we'll be hearing from you again in the near future. Keep up the good work, and best of luck to you and your entire team.
Thank you very much, Mikee K, and to the rest of the listening audience. Please be careful, be safe, look after each other. Thank you
So much.